Kedar Bhagwat on behalf of Ecological Society. Welcome you all for ninth Prakash Gole Memorial Lecture. In the loving memory of Gole sir, since 2014, Ecological Society is organizing the Prakash Gole Memorial Lecture and Discussion Series. In the past, lecture series featured distinguished scholars and researchers in the field of ecology and environment. Notable speakers include Mansoor Khan, Sripad Dharmadhikari, Satyajit Bhatkar, Dr. Debal Deb, Dr. Shailesh Rao, Sarat Chandra Lele, and Dr. Mahesh Rangarajan. In the year 2021, due to COVID, Ecological Society has organized online discussion series titled Understanding Reality. This series explored various aspects of building sustainable and equitable society through economy, water, food, and cities. The webinar series has featured prominent scholars such as Dr. Ajit Ranade, Ashish Kothari, Dr. Aditi Mukherjee, Kalpanatai Sarunke, Manoj Mishra, Girish Sohni, Dr. Amita Baviskar. For this ninth memorial lecture, we have with us Sri Soumya Dutta. Before we formally introduce him and commence this keynote address, I invite Ketaki to brief our distinguished guest about Ecological Society and the contribution of Gole sir in the field of ecology and environment.
Thank you, Kedar. So it's always pleasure to talk about Gole sir. I see actually many of the audience know Gole sir, but I think definitely for our speaker and few people who are new, for them I'll just briefly introduce Gole sir. It's so difficult to actually uh, just explain what Gole sir is and the kind of work that he has done through Ecological Society in 5 minutes. Impossible task, but let me just anyway begin. So I think Gole sir's wisdom was really evident in his 20s when he has written world's history in 3 volumes. Many of us know, and even before graduation he has written this world history in 3 volumes and in Marathi and named it really in a very unique style. So he was an economist, as maybe many of us know, but obviously his passion extended much beyond economics. In 1965, he pioneered, or say he established one organization named BOBP, Bharat Outward Bound Pioneers, along with many others who were passionate about trekking. And I think back in that time, it was really unique effort. And obviously his passion was that time definitely into trekking, and he initiated many treks into Himalayas and Sahyadris. And while he was doing that in 1968, he went on an interdisciplinary study in Nepal. I think from Pokhara to Muktinath, that was the trail. And that time, I think he just started taking interest into birds. And immediately following year in 1969, he founded and established actually WWF Pune. So that was, I think, what you can say, his journey into the world of birds began really that time. And then he worked with Salim Ali. He led quite a few expeditions. He worked on 4 cranes, uh, Siberian crane, demoiselle crane, blackneck crane, and Saras crane. And he has written many articles, research articles, popular articles, and actually conducted many workshops for bird watching, for nature education. And I must say that he really has got very unique writing style, probably inherited from his mother, who's a poetess, Padma Gole. And that style really is unique. Means I still remember, if you have read his books in Marathi, he has research paper and parallelly he would narrate the way he has conducted the study. I always remember one book in Meru Parvatacha Palyad. He has written, so when he was there in Siberia probably, and he was observing the nests of 3 females, Kyrgyzstan. So and bar-headed geese, and he has named all these 3 female geese, maybe Sunena or Surekha, because to identify each female from the other one, it's good idea to name it in a. So that's why I said very unique writing style, so that even common public could connect to his writing. And I think back then in 60s and 70s, when bird watching was not this popular the way it is right now in Pune, I think he contributed a lot. Then in 1979 he started Pakshimitra Sammelan, bird watchers meet in Maharashtra. He also conducted bird census in the same year. In 1982 he founded Ecological Society, the very unique organization which is dear to all of us sitting here. And obviously, then his work was not only limited to birds, but he worked on multiple projects. And in 1983, he worked on Pune rivers, and did the ecological assessment of Pune rivers and submitted a very holistic plan that how what we call currently river fronts can be developed in a ecologically, basically with ecological approach. And maybe following that or during that particular decade he traveled extensively abroad in India, Leh, Ladakh, Gujarat, many places, and obviously studied birds. As well as while he was doing that, actually he led or have done many expedition with Gole madam and Mahajan sir in during 1989 to 2000. He actually has pioneered again a very unique program for irrigation engineers, just to give them insights into catchment conservation of our dams. And and immediately, means I think while that program was ending, that time he founded in 1998, he launched again another pioneering program, which many of us sitting here are actually have done this program with him, which is named as Nature Conservation and Sustainable Development. So, and again, lastly, absolutely pioneering work he has done when it comes to restoration. So, very unique projects he started in India back in 1986. He started working on forest restoration. He worked on wetlands restoration in Ujni, grassland restoration in again drier parts of Maharashtra near Fulton. So all those were really absolutely, what you can say, inspiring projects. So I feel so enriched and proud of profound impact he has had on all of us. Really feel proud. So Gole sir passed away in 2013, and after him, bunch of students, we few of us are running this Ecological Society's course after him. But I must say he has really left us a really wonderful legacy for all of us, and we're just trying to take it forward in our best possible way. Thank you.
So Ketki has briefed us about Ecological Society's journey since 1982. Now, going forward, you might have seen over social media and a lot of interactions that Ecological Society is doing a lot of different things than this 10 months program. So, we have been guided by Ravi Pandit sir, and he's here to basically tell about vision that he has for Ecological Society going forward.
So, Kedar, it's not the vision that I have, it's the vision that all of us have put together. So working with the team of Ecological Society, now the question that we are addressing is that knowing this rich legacy that has been brought forward by Gole sir and that has been nurtured so dearly by the team here, what could be our next steps? And we were thinking that we must do something which can increase the impact of what we are doing hugely. Because everything that we do in the sphere of ecology is probably even more urgent and important than it has ever been in the past. So now what we are saying, so we are looking at increasing the impact in 4 or 5 dimensions. First one is the course that we currently conduct. So, we were restricted to a certain set of people who would come and attend the course in person. And for the last couple of years, we have been also doing some online courses. Now, this time what we did was we recorded the lectures of all. So now next year, we will have in-person course and we will have the online course. And the online course will have really 3 components. One is actually all the lectures, to be done according to the people's own timetables. Then once a month interaction with the faculty. So if you have any questions that came to your mind, you can talk to them and have an extensive discussion. And we will have some field visits. And we are hoping that next year, when we launch this, we will have at least 500 participants online, because that would significantly increase our impact. So that is the first thing that we are doing as far as our regular course is concerned. Then we had multiple brainstorming sessions on this, which are the key segments we should work with so as to increase our impact significantly. And we came up with 4. One is students, clearly because they are the population of the future. Secondly, administrators, because they have a significant impact on the society. Third is journalists, because they can spread the good word for us. And the fourth one is architects, because quite a bit of the impact of ecology happens through what the architects do. And now we are working on these 4 segments, and I'll talk maybe a minute or two about each of these. So our idea is that we should cover as many students as possible, so as to ignite the flame of ecology, love of nature in them while they are still in school. And for many of us, certainly for me, the love of ecology came because when I was in the 7th standard, we had a very good teacher who took us on nature walks and etc. And so now we have a team working on schools. And what we want to do is we want to create at least 30 one-day or 2-day trips near Pune. We want to create at least 50 volunteers, and we want to offer this to school children, saying that you want to see river basin areas, this is a program of the Ecological Society for this. You want to see grasslands, you want to see forest, etc., etc., coastal area. So this is what we want to offer to them. Aniket, where is he? So Aniket is working on that initiative. We have already created 20 at the last count. So 20 such locations. So for each of these locations, we have a very beautiful flyer. And we say, when we take you to this trip, these are the trees you will see. Probably these are the birds you will see. These are the geographical landscapes that you will see, etc. So that people see this with more open eyes. I have always been a nature lover. I have walked around a lot, but only after I did the ecological course with this wonderful faculty, I started looking at nature with a different set of eyes. So we believe that we can do the same thing for students. We also want to start contests like Olympiads of nature. And now we are partnering with Jnana Prabodhini to do that. And we are hoping that over the next 3-4 years, we should be able to bring in at least 3 lakh students into this, so that they are all aware of what can be done in the area of nature. So I think the school children thing can be a very, very impactful thing. The second thing is we have been working, and so along with school children, we are also working with faculty, and we have delivered courses at locations where we are getting faculty from all over the country. At MSFDA, is that at MSFDA, where we are teaching them about nature. And we are now going to insist that you can't just sit here and listen to a lecture on nature. Tell us what you are doing when you go back to the colleges, and what do you teach to your students. So that is one, this is the student and teacher section. The second is we have been working with Yashada. This is for policymakers. So these could be the people from the development field, people from the administrative field. And so we recently had a course for them. And now what we want to do is we can say, if there is a course for sarpanches, if there is a course for divisional collectors, what is the handle that they have in terms of policy matters, and how we can help them with that. And so we are now building a team which does that. We have been now, as I said, we want to work with journalists, because they can impact what people read. And we are beginning by, we are starting a collaboration with the Pune University, their Faculty of Journalism, and we will be announcing a prize for the best reporting on ecology in the last 12 months. And it would be a handsome prize, so that we get more and more people engaged in that. And the last one is architects. Our team has already built courses for architects. How do you build environmentally sensitive buildings? And there also our intention is to create, we are already done actually creation of the coursework for them. And our intention is also to come up with some prizes for these kind of work done. And what we would like to do is to showcase them so that people have that in their mind. Every architect has that in his mind when he constructs or architects a new building, and those these considerations go into their mind. So these are the things that we are doing. We have a very ambitious vision, and you all know that the passionate hands is always a shortage. Luckily, because of the work that we have done, and as Ketki mentioned that once you come to Ecological Society, you catch that fever of love of ecology. So you might finish your course and go outside. So you may be out of Ecological Society, but Ecological Society is inside you. And so so there are many of you, and I'm sure there are many friends of yours. Please give them a shout, saying that if they have even 2 hours a week to spare, we have work for them. Because this is something that we all have to do together, because this the way in which we are currently seeing climate crisis, the more the hands that are engaged in changing the solution, the situation, the better it would be. So I would like to appeal to all of you to be a part of this new movement that we are starting with our most illustrious faculty. Thank you.
Now I request Gole Madam to basically felicitate our guest, so Soumya Dutta, by giving books by Gole sir, Gurudas and Ketaki. Now I request Santosh to please introduce our guest, and then we'll have a keynote address by our speaker.
Soumya Dutta, Soumya Da as I called him, is a long-standing people's science movement leader from India. He was one of the key people initiating one of the biggest people's science campaign, Bharat Jan Gyan Vigyan Jatha. And this was way back in 1992 to 95. As its national organizing secretary and also the largest school science learning improvement initiative, that is the National Children's Science Congress. He was the founding convener for that. He is formally educated in physics, computer science, and operations research. And in early life, he was a systems executive and then manager of a computer center in a corporate setting that he left to attend the social calling. For the past 30 plus years, Soumya has been actively working with a large variety of people's movements all across South Asia and is one of the leading voices from the Global South in the global climate justice campaign. He has authored, contributed to 12 books and wrote over 125 articles on climate, energy, water, river, and related issues. He was one of the founding members of India Climate Justice, was an advisory board member of the United Nations Climate Technology Center and Network, founding co-convener of SAPAC, South Asian People's Action on Climate Crisis, currently is board chair of Greenpeace Environment Trust, is a trustee of MOSAM, Movement for Advancing Understanding of Sustainability and Mutuality, executive member of Friends of the Earth India, advisor on climate and ecological justice to Indian Community Activist Network ICANN, National Working Group member of NAPM, National Alliance of People's Movement, advisory on climate justice issues to National Platform for Small Scale Fish Workers, NPSSFW, and he was an Ashoka Fellow. Soumya was also active in the accountability campaigns against IFIs, that is the International Financial Institutes like World Bank, ADB, NDB, etc., and help communities with scientific studies, reports, etc., help the fight for ESS, environmental and social safeguards. He has extensively engaged with the national and subnational climate and energy policy spheres and the UNFCCC process for about 19 years. Soumya also engaged extensively with the issues of rivers and the ecological impacts of big projects on them. Worked in Bhagirathi Ganga in Testa and Narmada Valley areas. has also done extensive studies of climate change impacts on vulnerable communities, studies of disaster impacts, and help poorer working class communities like small scale fish workers, street vendors, construction workers, etc. He has extensively lectured in universities in India, US, Europe, China, and other countries, done capacity building workshops and engagement with multiple communities, conducted sessions on climate crisis and energy issues for universities and institutes, and travels and works side by side with vulnerable communities. So today he was going to be in Pune, and I took that opportunity to get him here in the evening, basically. Apart from this, Soumya was an active mountaineer and mountaineering teacher. Like Gole sir, he was also a mountaineer. Did several expeditions and many high altitude treks and have trained over 1200 people in mountaineering and adventure activities. Over to you, Soumya Dutta sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me to deliver the keynote lecture for Professor Prakash Gole Memorial Lecture this time. And while I was hearing about Professor Prakash Gole's achievement, it's a really sort of remarkable achievement, remarkable courage for someone to start this kind of thing 42 years ago, because I was being reminded, I was reflecting back that around, and my partners and one or two partners in the crimes that we do together with people's groups. Joe is sitting here. So when I was trying to give this awareness messages, lectures, sessions, taking sessions in universities around 18-20 years ago about the climate crisis, what it is leading to, what are the trends, who are the people being impacted, what are the major policy gaps, I was being told by many of my friends, including my friends in US and European climate justice movements, that Shomo, you are using alarmist language. People will get frightened. So today, or starting a few years back, the same group of people say, yes, you told that at that point of time, and today we are actually facing that in our lives year after year after year. So this also gives a very clear sense that people who can see what is coming based on evidence, not on opinion, based on evidence, based on solid studies, have a real value in the society, in getting society prepared to actually face what is coming, to be less at the mercy of quote unquote natural changes. And climate crisis is by no means a natural change that everyone knows. So I'll start with paying my respect to Professor Prakash Gole for being so courageous, so with a person with so much foresight, and starting something which is carrying on, and not only him, his students who have been carrying on this for decades together. Because we know how difficult it is. It is comparatively easier to start something. Actually, we started, like Santosh said, 1993, we started the National Children's Science Congress with a lot of ideas how to change India's science education process. And it was accepted in the NCF, National Curricular Framework. I was working with Professor Yashpal for several years and Professor Anil Sargopal. But after 30 years, the Ministry of Science and Technology has forcefully stopped it. So last year. So we know how difficult it is to carry on some program for long, though it is comparatively easier, I'm repeating this, to start one. So hats off to both Professor Prakash Gole and the Ecological Society. I will today focus on basically because climate crisis, and for very good reasons, we have stopped talking about climate change years back. And if you look at many of the global media, including The Guardian and many others, very well-known media, they have stopped talking about climate change years back. And they are talking about climate crisis. And when we talk about climate crisis, the understanding comes from people at the bottom who are being impacted every year. And if I can give you a figure, these are study figures. Today, the UNFCCC's own estimate shows every year something like 1.8 billion people, 180 crore people, suffers from some kind of climate extreme. And there are two kinds of climate impacts. One is the extreme events, and one category is what is called the slow onset events. which is not an extreme like a massive rainfall and flooding or a cyclone. Those are climate extreme events, and there are slow onset events. And I'll keep giving examples of all of these. Like if you still recall, not too long back, 2022, during February 2022, the government of India and the farmers all were happy that this will be a bumper harvest year for wheat. 2022 February, the Ministry of Agriculture Secretary gave a statement. And March and April, there were 3 heat waves. The wheat production crashed in India. The wheat production crashed. Crores of small and marginal farmers who took loans to cultivate wheat could not pay back. And for them, you understand why suicides increased, why distress in their families increased. But apart from that, 18 countries who depended on Indian wheat import, because if you still recall, Indian government imposed a ban on wheat export after that wheat production crash. And countries like Bangladesh, Egypt, and several Gulf countries who depend on Indian wheat for their roti and bread, they were in crisis. So, and there are hundreds of examples like this, where a crisis in one country is creating, due to climate change crisis, is creating ripple effect across borders of countries, across borders of regions. Because otherwise it is not thinkable. It's difficult to imagine that something happening in large parts of India will affect Egypt and other Gulf countries. Same thing happened with many other countries. I can keep giving example, but very recent, I'll just like to mention this because this also has implications for international relationships, not only between governments, but also between people. If you recall this year, 2024, just a couple of months back, not even fully 2 months back, maybe 2 months, Bangladesh complained hugely against India. India has released a lot of water and there was massive flooding and complete destruction in the eastern part of Bangladesh. There was massive climate-induced rainfall events in Tripura. And Tripura, being a small hilly state, has no way to keep the water and put it in pockets, not to let them flow to Bangladesh. So these are happening because of changes that has been caused by roughly 150 years of overconsumption, over-extraction and burning of fossil fuels, and destruction of the forests across the globe, most notably in the Latin American continent, in the South American continent, and in Indonesia and Malaysia, but also in our countries across the globe. And as a result, things are happening, massive extreme events are happening, which are impacting people across borders and creating tensions and bad relationships, mistrust, suspicions between people. So these need to be understood in a larger context. And when we talk about India, I often mention this, and this is something very important to do, that when you talk about an ecological challenge, forget about a crisis, an ecological challenge, because not all hazards and risks need to become a disaster. If we are prepared, then you can prevent an existing hazard from becoming a disaster. We are much less prepared in most of this, that's why we face so many disasters. But when we talk about quote-unquote natural disasters and climatic events, you cannot just talk about India. You have to talk about South Asia. There are 3 natural features, geographical and climatological, which binds us very, very closely. One is the Himalayas, which dominates, which controls a lot of our ecological aspects, including the rivers, the winds, the weather, how the monsoon front comes. The second is the North Indian Ocean region, the Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, and the North Indian Ocean, which is collectively called North Indian Ocean region. And third is the South Asian monsoon. These 3 connect all 8 South Asian nations very, very closely. And the fourth factor that connects us is actually our genetic, cultural relationships. We are very similar in multiple aspects, including our DNA shows from 9,000 years ago, we had more or less a common DNA. So in spite of all this, these massive climatic events are actually causing lot of mistrust, lot of suspicion, lot of divisions, lot of accusations. And I just came back from Baku a few days ago, and there on the last day I had a meeting at the Bangladesh pavilion with lot of mistrust. I was the only Indian to be invited. The Nepalis are well invited, the Pakistanis are well invited, but all of our neighbors today accuse India of playing a very big brother role, a kind of mafia don role, and that's they are openly saying this. So we also, being civil society, being people's so-called people's representative, or much closer to people of our countries than our governance system is, we have a clear role to break this down, to build trust, build bridges. So that's one of the major tasks that we climate justice activists also do. And that's what we have started an initiative recently. Let's see how it goes. And with after 2014, when the SARC process, the last SARC meeting, and some of you might recall, every SARC meeting used to be accompanied, either preceded or simultaneously, by a people's SARC process. And we are very active in that. And we are able to actually dictate some agendas, not in an authoritative manner, but in a very subtle manner, issues which we generated from the ground to the SARC governments. Until 2014, this process was reasonably successful. 2014, as you recall, because of India-Pakistan binary, this process broke down, and India chose to go, quote unquote, look east, act east, BIMSTEC, all these processes. And as a result, the South Asian cooperation that we very, very urgently need, that broke down. And I don't know how you can tackle the climate crisis in the subcontinent, in South Asia, without cooperation. Bangladesh and India has 54 transboundary rivers. 3, Bangladesh is upper riparian, 51, India is the upper riparian state. If you consider tributaries, Nepal and India has 136 transboundary rivers. All of them, Nepal is the upper riparian state. Similar with Bhutan, with Pakistan. Pakistan has essentially one river, Indus. And entire agriculture of Pakistan depends on Indus. And you know what happened in first 2012, then again in 2022. Entire Pakistan, not entire, but entire Pakistan was flooded. 1/3 of Pakistan was underwater for 3.5 months. So, and unfortunately, the Western Himalayan part, the Himalayas has 3 parts, the Western Himalaya, Central Himalaya, and Eastern Himalaya. The Western Himalayan part is more susceptible to some kind of climate impacts because the Western Himalayan rivers depend far more on snow and ice melt than on the Eastern Himalaya or the Central Himalaya. Because the Central and Eastern Himalaya get far more water from rains and what the soil holds, not the Western Himalayas, because it is so barren. It's basically large parts of cold desert and dry areas. So it depends far more on snow and ice melt. And that's going down drastically. In fact, if you look at the ISRO study, the SSC, Space Application Center, which is part of Indian Space Research Organization, from the satellite data, and from 1970s, the satellites were not able to actually measure the depth of the snow and ice cover. They were able to measure the area. But from 1990s, satellites are now able, because the spectrum of the radiation, the wavelength has changed. They have a multi-spectrum studies. So now the depth can also be measured. But even before that, in 40 years, ISRO shows that we have lost from the Indian Himalayan part 21% of our snow and ice cover in just 40 years. So these are changes which are extremely rapid by any natural scale. See, climate change, a lot of people say climate change. Okay, the world has faced climate change many times. Yes, every 100,000 years the glacial age comes. And that's because of the Milankovitch cycles. There are 3 Milankovitch cycles: the Earth's orbit around the sun, Earth's precession, and the orbital tilt. These 3 determine when the climate will change, and this is predictable. Roughly every 100,000 years, we pass through an ice age, we come into an interglacial for around 18-20,000 years, then we again start falling to an ice age. And that's a natural cycle. So climate change, quote unquote change, is nothing alarming or nothing that world has not seen. But what we are doing now, the changes that took 100,000 years, we are crossing that in 100 years. And it's a very fond subject, and I love to keep reminding people that even though as Homo sapiens, of course, the humans, if you look at Homo, the Homo genus, it's roughly 2.6 million years starting from Homo habilis. But if you look at us, Homo sapiens, it's roughly 250,000 years, roughly. That's what the current evidence shows. But all these years, except the last 10,700 years, we are hunter-gatherers. We basically didn't move very far from what we started with, being hunter-gatherers and moving from place to place in search of the food and the water. And when one place stopped giving enough, we had to move another place. But over the last 10,700 years, the whole history changed. Why did it happen? Did our brains suddenly become big? No. There is clear evidence that our brains from Homo erectus's 600 cc to our 1400 cc, it happened over 1.6 million years. But actually our brains are now shrinking. If you look at recent studies of the last 50, 100 years, so it's not increasing. Even 10,000, it has not done that. What is a very remarkable thing is in Earth's climatological history, the Holocene, the last 10,700 plus, maybe 11,000 years, had an extremely stable climate. In the decadal figures, every 10 years average you take, because year to year it changes. So we take the decadal figures to show how the climate is changing. The decadal figures, if you look at, during the entire Holocene period, there was never a period when the temperature went beyond 1 degree Celsius above or 1 degree Celsius below. And for agriculture to develop, a very predictable climate is an essential condition. Because agriculture, as we know today, or as we knew 10,000 years ago, could not have developed if we had very unpredictable weather. So that was one. I'm not claiming that was the only reason. There might have been other reasons, but all evidence shows in the Tigris and Euphrates river basins, where agriculture is supposed to have originated and spread from, but there are evidence of 4 different places where agriculture has originated independently. Now we have that evidence, but those didn't spread as much. The maximum spread of agriculture is from that basin, but the Fertile Crescent. But agriculture started and spread in a period, didn't start 50,000 years ago when human beings were as capable, didn't start 30,000 years ago when human beings were same brain and same kind of intelligence, but it started during this Holocene. And from agriculture, we came to urban civilization. Of course, there are a lot of questions about what do you call civilization. I will not go into that. That's another debate. Whether building big structures, megalithic structures is civilization. And even that too, if you look at last 30 years research, Göbekli Tepe and this area, we are seeing that human beings have built massive megalithic structure even 11,700 years ago. So maybe our civilization history also needs to be rewritten. But if you look at what is accepted, generally accepted history of human beings, Homo sapiens, I'm not talking about the entire Homo genus, but Homo sapiens, then in the last 10,700 years, we changed remarkably. And simultaneously, we changed the earth. There are a lot of myths. I will also like to point out to some myths, which we also as social activists, as justice activists, we like to propagate, but against which there are enough evidence. We changed the earth in the sense when human beings, the last most successful out of Africa migration, we started roughly around 75,000 years ago, did change the earth in multiple ways. And it's not that we changed ourselves, we changed the earth. And there are now enough evidence that wherever this modern Homo sapiens spread, because there is evidence that Homo sapiens started spreading even earlier, but that spread was not successful out of Africa migration. They died out in the intermediate areas. In the area where you come out from Africa, enter Middle East, there the journey ended. But the last out of Africa migration, as of all of you know, all of us know, is the most successful one. And we are successful in not only wiping out the two other existing human species that was there at that time, the Homo neanderthalensis and Denisovan men, we wiped them out, and the Homo erectus, which existed in other continents, because the Homo erectus started migrating much before, about 1.8 million years ago. We extinguished all of the human species apart from us, and there is clear evidence now, wherever we spread, the megafauna extinction took place. In Australia, when human beings first reached around 48 to 49,000 years ago, there is evidence that Australia had massive forest areas. Now clear evidence. An Australian continent was changed. The human beings burned down forest to create grassland to attract prey, which can be hunted easily. Hunting prey in a forest is much difficult. Hunting prey in an open grassland, savanna, is much easier. But all of this happened. Human beings did extinguish a lot of animals, a lot of other species, but the one quality is those humans never did it knowingly. They didn't even know what the earth is. They never knew that their action is impacting other species. It was their survival. And that's what they acted on, like any other animal. But what we are doing now, at least from the last 100 years, 120 years, we know what we are doing. We know that our actions have already put around 1 million species close to extinction. If you have seen the 2018 IPBS study, which is a global study like IPCC, IPBS is also a global body of scientists, basically biological diversity and ecological systems services. That shows that 1 million, close to 1 million species is facing extinction within a few decades, and that we are doing knowingly. If you see, all of us have seen the newspaper reports. We have been reporting this from 20 years ago, but over the last 3-4 years, all of you must have seen in the newspapers what the scientists of ExxonMobil knew in the 1970s. Their own scientists were reporting, their studies were showing the amount of oil and gas they were pumping out and putting out in the market for burning is going to change the climate almost irreversibly. They knew this. They reported it to the top management, and the top management hushed it up. So as the civilized human, Homo sapiens, what we are doing today, and when I say what we are doing, I am not pointing to communities which have no control over the governance, no control over resources in that sense, who are dependent on natural resources for survival. I am not talking about them. I am talking about those who control the governance, those who control the finance, those who control the economy. Those governance collectively, that entire global governance system is doing this knowingly. And it's not today that we know the threat we face. All of us being Ecological Society members and alumni and all this, you know that 1972 was the year, the Stockholm Conference, when the global leadership recognized that this ecological crisis, including the climate, that time they used to call it climate change, is not just an environmental problem. It's a problem of political economy. You cannot tackle it with just looking at the ecology. You have to see what the economy is doing. You have to see what the politics is doing. And without changing the politics and the economics, you cannot tackle the ecological crisis. So that was known in 1972 and accepted as such. And that's the beginning of action, collective global governance action on ecological issues. Before that, it was ecological problem, environmental problem. So bring environmentalists, bring engineers, put them together. Don't involve the government. Don't involve the prime ministers or presidents or ministers. But 72 was a marker year. Globally, it was recognized. But it took 20 years for this to translate into any action. It was Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. From 72 to 92, a lot of reports came. The Limits of Growth report, Club of Rome, lot of reports were there. Brundtland Commission report obviously was a very fuzzy report. Though they voiced the concerns, there was nothing very concrete that you can catch on. It's a very fuzzy report. It's a good intention report, but you have nothing to hold. Okay, this is what we are in, where we are in. this is what you need to do. That kind of thing was not there at all. But 1992, the so-called Earth Summit gave birth to 3 global ecological compacts, and which are all extremely important today. One we talk about quite a bit, like we just came back from Baku, is the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That's the most talked about. But the second global environmental compact that came out of the Earth Summit is the UNCBD, United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, which is also talked about nowadays to some extent. But the third one almost no one talks about is the UNCCD, United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification. And if you look at, forget about the world where a lot of deserts are there, and we know that deserts, basically for climatic reasons, desert exist around the 30-degree north and south latitude. That's a natural phenomenon because of the 3 global wind patterns, the Hadley cycle, the Ferrel cycle, and the polar cycle. So these 3 are natural cycles of the world, wind cycles, and these dominate or determine where the deserts will be mostly. And all of the world's deserts, if you look at, except 1 or 2 extensions, they are around the 30-degree north, both sides, and 30-degree south. But the way now the world is changing because of the kind of changes, and I'll come to that quickly, is around the world, deserts have started spreading from around 25 to 28 years back. Present data shows the world's deserts started spreading, and spreading very fast for the last few years, but not all deserts. Because if you look at Thar Desert, which is shared by India and Pakistan, Thar is actually becoming greener. And there is a very clear reason for that. The Thar is becoming greener, the deserts of Rann of Kutch are becoming greener, and this will become greener. Maybe in 50 years, Thar will be a savanna, or maybe 80 years, Thar will be a savanna. And that is not a good news, because all the life, all the vegetation, all the animal life, all the microbes that have adapted to that environment will face the threat of extinction and will not even know. Because as my friend Joe also knows, we have been challenging the global financial institutions. Once the World Bank, which was modifying its ESS, Environmental and Social Safeguard, and they proposed in this 2012 consultation, in the last consultation, they proposed a process called biodiversity offset. What that means is you will be allowed by World Bank funding to wipe out the biodiversity of one area, and you will promise that I will create another area of biodiversity which will offset this. So in that consultation, I strongly objected and I critiqued and I gave data saying that the scientists agree that we only know about we have actually documented around 1.9 million species, but scientists, you are better equipped to say that, but scientists estimate that around 8 million species might exist on the earth. So if you don't know what exists, how are you going to create that in another place? How are you going to offset that, what you have wiped out, without knowing? So they had to drop that, but very recently I found in some other fora, this is coming back. So this is one, I don't want to go into what the financial institutions do, but they have a very major role. So that's why I said, you cannot tackle this crisis, and this is a poly crisis, without seeing the economy, the global economy, and who controls them, in what way they can control them, and the global politics. And I'm and witness for the last 19 years how the UN process, the UNFCCC process and the CBD process is hijacked. And I have seen this from outside as an observer. For all these years, I was as a civil society representative, but 3 years I was an insider because I was in the advisory board, which is also the governing board of a UN body. The UN Climate Convention has 2 frameworks. One is called the technical framework or technological framework. One is called the financial framework. So I was in the board of the technical framework body, CTCN. So I saw how financial institutions are capturing, how private finance is using the UN forum to facilitate their profit making. I will not reveal all the details here, but these are clearer and clearer every year that passes. So today we are facing a challenge which is not only the change in physical climate systems. And when I talk about the climate system, is just one of the 9 planetary boundaries that you must have heard about. And all of us know, but still in the interest of reminding us all, when the first planetary boundary studies was brought in 2009, none of the planetary boundaries were broken. In the second study, 2015, we saw 3 boundaries are either breached or about to be breached. And in the last 2023 study, it says 6 of the boundaries of the 9 planetary boundaries have gone beyond the safe operating limit for planet Earth. So that's where we stand today. That's why we call it a crisis, and not only because more than 1.7 or 1.8 billion people face the climate crisis every year, some form of impact every year. There is a fundamental difference between the climate crisis that we face and almost all other ecological crises that we have worked on or faced or still today face. Like all of us know what a big dam does. And standing here close to Narmada, not too far from Narmada, many other major rivers, we have seen what the big dams do. And I have also worked in Narmada, in the Tista Basin, in Brahmaputra and Bhagirathi Basin. We have seen how local ecologies, local people's livelihood, forests have been destroyed. But take out the dam, in 15 years, the river reclaims the ecology. And this has been shown. You create a mine which is not desired. I'm not advocating mines very clearly. You create a mine, you create destruction, but stop the mining, put the so-called overburden, which is not the overburden, which is the soil and rock and everything, into the place, and allow little bit of natural regeneration with a little help. In 30 years, that place will be reclaimed. But today we are standing at a stage in the climate crisis that there is a very clear possibility, some of the which we call the positive amplification feedback mechanism might already have kicked in or about to be kicked in. An amplifying feedback mechanism is something where the cause increases the effect then increases the cause, then the increased cause increases the effect. I'll give one example, and that's also an example for another illustration. Take the rapid ice melt, snow and ice melt in both northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. Both the Arctic sea ice, the Greenland ice sheet, and the Antarctic ice sheet, particularly the West Antarctic ice sheet, which is extremely vulnerable now, which was thought to be stable for thousands of years. Now scientists are predicting maybe within 100 years that entire West Antarctic ice shelf might collapse. And now they are predicting that the Arctic Ocean might become what is called blue ocean event, ice free in the summer. And if that happens, that will be the end of the game for any climate action. It will be taken out of all human action possibilities. Why is that? And that's an example of an amplified feedback system. Because when more ice melts, because the temperature is rising, sea ice has an albedo of 0.06. That means only 6% of the incident sunlight and heat is reflected back, rest is absorbed. So it's a very good absorber. Ice has an albedo of 0.9, fresh ice 0.92. So 90% plus is reflected back into space. So if you have an ice covered area, very large, like millions of square kilometers, both north and south, you have a cooling effect. And the more the ice melts on the sea water absorbs far more heat. That heat helps melt more ice. That helps absorb more heat. And that cycle, many top Arctic scientists, including David Wadham and others, I have talked to them in person. When they talk about this, their voice trembles. Probably we have lost it, like that. So top scientists are actually now not concerned, they are frightened that we have probably, maybe not, but probably we are going to lose many of the Earth systems from ever being possible to be stabilized again. So that's one amplifying feedback system. In science, it's called a positive feedback system, but many of us started calling it a positive feedback, but the effect is actually negative. Actually, in science, the negative feedback system is positive because the cause reduces the effect reduces the cause. So you come back into an equilibrium state again quickly. But the amplifying, which is the positive, so-called positive feedback, we call it an amplifying feedback system. Now, just not to call it positive, those actually increases the effect. And this is one of them. The methane release from permafrost and subsea soil, frozen soil, is another of this amplified feedback mechanism. And the satellite data shows globally, last 5 to 6 years, there is a methane boom, which is not explained. Where is this methane coming from? Scientists are guessing, they are trying to pinpoint, but they don't really know exact sources. But they are seeing in the northern hemisphere, far north, the methane release is very fast. So many of them are now afraid that the amplifying feedback of methane has started, because there is far more methane trapped in permafrost soil, frozen soil, permanently frozen soil, which is called permafrost, which is extensively in Siberia, northern Canada, Nordic countries. And that's the area where the biggest forest is also there, the boreal forest. Amazon, by the way, Amazon is not the biggest forest. The boreal forest is the biggest forest in the world. So the methane, as most of you would know also, in a 20-year period, methane is 87 times as powerful a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. So if we kickstart the methane amplifying feedback mechanism, it will be end of any climate action that we can do. After that, we can stop all our vehicles, we can stop all our electricity, we can stop all our agriculture, nothing will happen. The earth, unfortunately, the earth was for very long, as I said, in the Holocene, was a very stable state. And as scientists now very clearly have shown, the earth has a few stable states. It's not the only stable state. We are now pushing the earth to another, it's like this. The earth is here. So we are pushing it here. And if it crosses this and goes into the higher one, that's called a hothouse earth. And human beings have not seen that in our entire history. So we are actually now standing in front, just tell me when I should start, then there will be some, I will also like to have some interaction, anything related to this, that will be a more, so tell me another, how much time? Maybe another 5-6 minutes, then I'll stop. So what we are standing today, as I was telling, and that's a feature, and that's what I was telling, the climate crisis is a fundamentally different nature. If we push the earth beyond today's stable state, then maybe for thousands of years, the earth will be in another state which will be extremely hostile to today's life forms, today's species. It's not that everything will be wiped out. It's not that humanity will completely die out. Again, our political, economic controls and resources will come into play, and we have seen that. Africa, even very nature-rich countries in Africa like Kenya. Last year, if you have noticed, Kenya is very green with all Masai Mara and everything, which we enjoyed. Last year, for 2 months, Kenya experienced extreme drought. Hundreds of thousands of domesticated animal died, thousands of elephants died, deer died, everything. And we saw those, some of them in the northern Kenya. 2 months later, Kenya faced an extreme flood. People are migrating out of African region, Sudan, South Sudan, parts of Ethiopia, Eritrea. It's not because they don't love their homes, because they have nothing. Their lands are there, it do not produce water. I have seen personally people scratching the ground of river bed, taking out very dirty, to me very dirty water, and passing it through a cloth and drinking that. They have nothing else, and that water is not good for irrigation, agriculture. You can drink a little bit, and that cannot sustain you for long. So people by the millions are already migrating. They are already climate refugees, climate force migrants. If you come to India, if you go to the Sundarbans, and I was working with communities in Sundarbans and in Tista Basin, North Bengal. In North Bengal, I saw in the Tista Basin, very low lands, which for 5 to 6 months remain underwater. When Tista goes down, that land comes up, so people do the cultivation. And all these people, they live on this bamboo raised huts and communicate by boats. And many of them are from Sundarbans. So when I asked them, why from 600 kilometers south, Sundarban is such a large area, they said after this Aila and 2 more cyclones, because the saline water came in and made the land and the ponds and the wells saline, nothing grows. So they have already migrated. And these are millions of people all across India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, everywhere. And this is only going to increase exponentially. Because the other scientific character that all scientists, all Earth system scientists agree on, that these impacts are non-linear. It's not that if you double the concentration, it will be double the impact. It might be 5 times or 10 times the impact. And that's what exactly has happened. The melt rate of ice from Greenland ice sheet is now today 6.5 times that it used to be 20 years ago. In 20 years, it is increased by 6.5 times. Same with West Antarctic ice shelf. So, and not to forget the Indian subcontinent, because the Western Himalayan region is very rapidly losing its snow and ice cover. So what will happen to our Western Himalayan rivers, including the only river Indus for Pakistan, on which Pakistan's entire food production depends, except a little bit from here and there, some rainwater. Major food production in Pakistan, if you look at Pakistan during the summer monsoon, satellite image, you will see a green patch. Just like you see the Nile, you see Pakistan, the green area is along the Indus. So if Indus loses, which is very likely, it has happened earlier, you recall Harappan civilization. And now we know why Harappan civilization declined. Because it started cooling, the global climate started cooling, the monsoon shifted east, and that document, that evidence is there in the lake bed deposits and many other proxy data. So at that point of time, because the monsoon shifted east, the Harappan civilization lost its water resources, drastically reduced. They didn't have food surplus, so they had to abandon the cities and move east. Today, the monsoon is moving west. As evidenced over the last 10 years, the Thar desert, you have heard about Barmer and Bikaner getting flooded 2 years ago, and that's happening with increasing rapidity. I was in Gujarat just after coming back from Baku. Next day I went to Gujarat. For many of you might know, Ashish, you know, this Bikalp Sangam meeting. This is the 10th year of Bikalp Sangam annual meet. So the Rann of Kutch desert is getting lot of rainfall. Again, it's not good news. 74% of India's salt comes from Gujarat. 60% of India's salt comes from Kutch. So if rainfall increases tremendously, the small salt panners are gone. Because what they do is, it's not seawater. The groundwater is very salty. They dig up the water, let it dry, and if the rainfall keeps happening more and more, the salt will never come into salt. It will be solution. And to this time we saw it. Even now, the Rann of Kutch lake has lot of water. There is salt crystallizing, but lot of water. By this time, it should be dry. And this year I can understand, because the La Nina was developing in the equatorial Pacific. And any year, when during late monsoon, the La Nina develops, you have late monsoon heavy rainfall. And that's what happened in Himalayas also. That's one of the reasons why many of the landslides and other disasters are happening this year, because it's a late monsoon La Nina development. I don't know why the IMD do not tell people this. Why don't they make people get people prepared? But this was known. We were telling about this. The IMD must have known about it. So there are political considerations what our Monsoon Vibhag, Mausam Vibhag does. But leaving that apart, I will end by saying this. We know what is going wrong today. There are things going wrong in the global scale. And for that, many of our groups, we are working at the global level. Many of us are trying to work on some of our friends are working very hard on the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Several countries have got on board, but that's very slow progress. Because the climate crisis will not work for our very slow processes and very, very slow action. All our differences, should it happen? Is there a climate change or no? Maybe this is a natural cycle. Even today we had some people questioning that. That will happen because human beings by nature will try to question and say, okay, I don't think this is this might be that, might be a cyclic thing. But climate crisis have its own life and its own motion. What we are doing to our atmosphere, and this is basically on the atmosphere, but before ending, I will just mention, I will not go into details. As science shows, 92% of the additional heat of global warming has gone into the oceans, not in the atmosphere. What we face, the climate change we face, is of the atmosphere. 92% of the additional heat has got into the oceans, which has never happened in our known history, our recorded history. Over the last 5 years, there are a continuous sequence of marine heat waves, which we never heard earlier. But marine heat waves today are a common feature. 23 and 24, the sea surface temperature, actually the ocean surface, but it's called SST in scientific terminology, have broken all records. And if the sea surface is very high, temperature is high, and the air temperature is high, every degree Celsius rise of the air temperature, the air can hold 7% extra moisture. And over the last 2-3 years, 3 to 4 degrees higher temperature was common. And the massive amount of extra water that evaporated and stayed in the air, risen up, has to go somewhere. When it cools, it has to come down. And that has resulted in 2023, if you have noticed, entire Himachal Pradesh was devastated. Like 2013, there was a massive disaster in Uttarakhand. It was not Kedarnath. It was not a cloudburst. Because I was tracking the satellite data at that time. It happened over an area of 37,000 square kilometers. I was tracking the NASA satellite data. No cloudburst can happen over 37,000 square kilometers. That doesn't happen even this year. In 2013, the climate-driven disaster, which is normally known as Kedarnath disaster because most people died near Kedarnath, the monsoon front, which takes 1 month to travel from central UP to Jaisalmer, which is our last point. It goes to Pakistan also, but our IMD tracks only up to that. It normally takes 1 month. In 2030, it traveled that distance in 2.5 days. So it's not a cloudburst. Signatures of massive climate disruption, which is indicating that many of the earth systems are nearing collapse, are in front of us in multiple forms, and the signals are very strong. But we still see a lot of resistance, one in the governance. They are agreeing that all these are happening. Every COP I go, every policymaker I met or we met, discuss with, they agree, yes, this is happening. But how can we change? See, even today, 80% of global primary energy supply comes from coal, oil and gas. And that's for the global figure. After 20 years of renewable energy, today 80% of global primary energy supply, not just the electricity. For countries like India, electricity is around 18% of the energy we consume. Rest comes in non-electrical energy forms. So 80% if it comes today from fossil fuels, and for India it is 84 or 85 because India has less reliance on renewable. It started late. It has picked up quite a bit, no doubt, but started late and don't have the manufacturing capacity. So today we are in a state where action on the climate crisis in multiple fronts, the mitigation, the adaptation, resilience building, technical capacity, moving finance away from fossil fuels, all are extremely urgent. But the global financial institutions, and my friend Joe works much more on that. I am a helper to their work, Center for Financial Accountability. In the next 5 years after Paris Agreement, which everyone clapped quite a lot, the globe has tackled the climate crisis. 2015 December, 16, 17, 18, 19, the global emissions increased from 34.6 gigaton to 35.3 gigatons to 36 gigaton to 36.8 gigatons. Only in 2020 it dropped, not because of any saintly action, but COVID. And I'll end by saying that COVID is not the only catastrophic epidemic, pandemic that we are going to face. The last point, because we face a challenge which is multidimensional, and our understanding, our knowledge building and our preparations need to be multidimensional. In 2019, an international team of glaciologists and other scientists working in a Tibetan glacial field, and 2020 February the report was published. In one ice field, a glacial field, they found 33 virus species. Viruses are not considered full life, but let us consider different types of virus. 33 virus, different kinds of virus, and 28 of them were novel virus. A novel virus is what humanity has never faced. So we never developed the immunity for that, like the SARS-CoV-2. That's why it created such a massive disaster. So if one region can harbor, and that is frozen, but with increasing temperature, with very fast, rapid depletion of the snow and ice cover, hundreds and thousands of such frozen pathogens, some of which might be even deadlier than SARS-CoV-2, some of them might not be, might be benign. We don't know. As long as we don't face them, we don't know what will be causing what kind of thing. So if you think that one ice field is freezing 28 novel virus, what is there for the entire snow and ice cover, entire cryosphere? That's called the cryosphere. So there is a multi-dimensional crisis that we are facing. It's not unsolvable. It's solvable. We know what to do. We know how to do. The technology do exist. The finances do exist. What do not exist, two things I see as a major stumbling block. One, clearly, we should not be complacent. Clearly, the preparation of what we call the vanguard of people, civil society, we build on knowledge, but our own preparations are extremely poor. The knowledge base, the preparation, what we need to do, where we need to do, which communities where are suffering what, how do we intervene, how do we build their capacity, all of this can be worked today. It could have been worked from 10 years back. Today we can work that very well. But the other stumbling block is the global governance system, including the finance. The global financial system, it has to withdraw, it has to be stopped from supporting fossil fuels, it has to be pushed, goaded, pushed, shoved into supporting massive climate action, both in terms of adaptation and mitigation, which is not happening. There is a huge amount of vested interest. If I have invested thousands of crores, of course I don't have even 1 crore. So if I have invested 5,000 crores in a coal mine or a coal power plant, I'm not easily going to give it up because the climate crisis is there. And that's the kind of self-interest, vested interest globally. It's not one industrialist. I'll not take any name. It's globally it's happening. So unless we can break that by collective people's power globally, in our nations, in South Asia, which is an extremely well-knit region and where there is a possibility of action, and globally, we are not going to face this with any success. And if we can't do that, I think coming 50 or 100 generations will have to pay the price, and then we will be asked, what were you doing when you knew all this? Thank you.
Any questions, any thoughts?
You said that in South Asian region there is a possibility of making a change. What do you mean by that?
I mean by that there is a huge number of civil society and other institutional structure which already exist and collaborating. In 2014, when this process stopped, before that we had a collaborative climate action process. We had the Dhaka Declaration of Collective Action. We had the Thimphu Statement on Climate Action. We had a proposal and it was being operationalized, South Asian Food Bank. So we had a huge amount of cooperating initiative, collectively addressing the challenges, which we stopped, which we almost threw out because of India-Pakistan binary. And now this imperative is on us because the governments don't seem to be, particularly the government of India, don't seem to be interested in interacting with Pakistan, not even Bangladesh like you have seen. Maldives is completely out. Even Sri Lanka has been sort of alienated. So it is up on us, and we have not to take credit, but some of us have already started this process. We will soon start another larger process where South Asian civil society and any of your group with any contacts in any of these countries who understand, because this is not just the climate crisis, This the region has to face collectively. We cannot face these challenges on one nation basis. The climate crisis is not solvable in the nation state framework. That's very clear. Please.
So you spoke about climate deniers. What do you say to the perennially, starry-eyed people who say technology will solve this? We'll have large-scale carbon sequestration, trees in a fish tank, all kinds of things go around. This will solve it.
Today, actually, the carbon deniers, the denialists have gone down drastically. What they do, they have changed tactics. What they do is they question the pathways, the solutions that are seen. They are saying, can we do this in the reasonable time? Is there enough feasibility for this? Feasibility is a very sort of fuzzy thing. Feasibility can be changed if you put enough inputs. The other part you said is, sorry, what is the second? Technology. Technological optimism. I understand. Not only intelligence, like CCS, carbon sequestration and capture, storage, carbon sequestration, use and storage, CCUS, lot of this false solution move around. Very clearly, see plantation, anywhere you ask what to do, पेड़ लगाओ धरती बचाओ. See, nobody plants a पेड़. You don't plant a tree, you plant a sapling. And before even becoming a tree, it takes 9 to 10 years. Just let me just ask you a question. How do you travel? Like from Pune to Delhi or Bangalore, how do you travel? Take a flight, many of you. If you take a flight, I am in Delhi. If I take a flight to Delhi and Bangalore and come back for any meeting or anything, I am effectively cutting down 11 full-grown trees. One tree in a year, in a non-irrigated, cared area, net sequestration of carbon dioxide is around 25-26 kgs. That's the scientific figure, net. Because trees also exhale carbon dioxide and they sequester carbon dioxide. The balance is around 25-26 kg. My one travel, just one flight from Delhi to Bangalore and back, but I am not putting the blame on a person or an individual. I am giving an example. This is a systemic problem and this needs to be tackled at the systemic level. If I do this flight, just the flight emission, 200 and 200, 400 kgs, 8 trees gone, and the taxi, etc., another 2 trees, say 10 trees. But the government, Mr. Modi went to, 2 years ago, the climate conference was in Egypt, Sharm el Sheikh, a luxury resort town. There he launched LIFE, L-I-F-E, lifestyle for environment. So all of us are supposed to change our lifestyles to save the environment. But in India, he is cutting down on a very low emission transport, that is the trains, and he is encouraging aviation infrastructure. More airports, more new airlines, some airlines is ordering 250, some are 300. It's a race. And if you travel any distance, any significant distance, say Pune to Delhi, by train, by a good fast train, and travel by flight, the emission differences per passenger kilometer is 6 to 8 times. You spend as much carbon, you emit 6 to 8 times as much carbon if you travel by a flight. And this is even more if it is a short haul flight like Pune Delhi. If it is a long haul flight, it's a little less, but sometimes it goes up to 10 times for short haul flights. So it's, if I am not given a choice or I am not very aware, it's not my fault, not your fault that you have traveled by flight. It has to be a systemic solution. The extremely expensive, carbon intensive, emission intensive, destructive, environmentally destructive solutions have to be disincentivized, have to be tackled at the system level, have to be cut down quite a bit. Simultaneously, it is the task of the governance to provide you better methods, better alternatives. Otherwise, if you think of 145 crore people in India to understand everything and do all actions, it's ever going to happen. When I change and the world change, it never happens. There is an economic principle many of you might know, Jevons paradox. It's a principle in economics, it's not a theory. So it has been shown repeatedly that it doesn't work that way. I can take the example of US cafe number. You might know that. So It is not a personal choice only that will change the situation. Though as a person, like I try to avoid flights wherever possible. I have come to Pune by train, I'll go back by train. Often I do that even for longer distance, but that doesn't change the situation. My choosing a less intensive method do not change society's trajectory of what they do. And it's not their fault. It's not your fault or your fault you are taking a flight. It has to be systemic. So this technological solution, last year, the carbon sequestration, there is only one successful plant in Iceland where large scale carbon sequestration is happening at a reasonable time frame, because most of the other proposals of CCS or CCUS is carbon sequestration and storage, and CCUS is carbon sequestration, use and storage. So most of the others have no guarantee that the carbon dioxide you put either in a salt mine, abundant salt mine, or under the seabed, or in some place will not leak out very soon. So there is no guarantee for how many years it will be there, and nobody wants a huge carbon dioxide storage near their place. Have any one of you heard about the Lake Nyos disaster? It happened in Cameroon, I think in 1968. It was a natural disaster. Under a lake, huge amount of carbon dioxide built up, and for some reason there was an inversion. I don't have the time to explain the scientific process, and the whole carbon dioxide bubble which was under the water burst out. Something like 1860 people died, because carbon dioxide being heavier than air, it spread silently. There is no smell, no color. People sleeping and died. Sleeping people died, thousands. Tens of thousands of cattle died. Do you want that kind of a underground storage near your house or where you are? Nobody wants. So these CCS and CCUS proposals have not been shown. It's extremely expensive. The Iceland process is today costing $250 per ton. Who is going to pay that? International carbon market price is around $10 per ton. Who is going to pay 25 times that price? It's not workable. No other feasible solution has been shown. But so-called techno-fixers still are dreaming. And I am not against technology. There will be a lot of technologies. The technology will be needed. There are technologies which are doing good things. But carbon sequestration and this kind of fixation and nuclear, this is not going to take the price. I can cite example after example, but I don't have time. We have MIT studies showing that what is the ROI figure of nuclear and what is the time scale for zero.
So just an extension, if I may. So for someone like me who is not, who doesn't have the capacity to work on systemic changes or policy changes, will it help? And this may sound silly, just save yourself from the city and escape to the rural living. And I'm stopping short, but I mean,
I understood.
Maybe we can build a Noah's Ark equivalent for ourselves.
See, in this crisis, there will be no Noah's Ark. That's clear. But understand your point. It's very feasible. It's a good action. Actually, for the last 20 years, wherever 2020 was, I was giving lectures in many places, universities, colleges, schools, teachers' workshops. So I was also asked several times, sir, all these big things, what can we do? Tell me what I can do as an individual, as a family, or as a small group. So we also recognize there is a value in that. That is not going to stop the crisis, but there is a value in that. We also produce some material, a book, very good book called Lifestyle. Much before Mr. Modi launched Life, when we launched it, we released it in 2016, and the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change liked it very much. So at that time, the minister, Mr. Anil Madhav Dave, the Central Environment Minister, he released it with all of us standing with him. So we also brought out what a person or a small family or a group can do on their own without intervening in larger systems. But again, that will not stop this. That will be helpful. That will also be helpful in telling 10 other people, see, why do you do this? So your doing this is important, but far more important is your telling 10 or 100 others why you are doing this. That will have a larger cascading impact. Yes, please.
Sorry, go ahead.
So building on that same point, I think when you said we have to take the message to 100, I think that is where we face the biggest obstacle, because today's human values have come so low. Humans itself, I find, are their vain in nature. because like what you said, they think that technology will save them, somebody else will change. We have the ability to, conquer anything. And the other is what we see when we do what all this voluntary work is apathy at a level. And if we tell this to people, they're saying, who are you to stop my aspirations? Like what you said, people are aspiring. So even if Mr. Modi says that, oh no, we have to change our lifestyle, I don't think people will accept that, because they will say that, where is the development you promised? Where are my aspirations going to get? So it's far more than a systematic change. It's a social, whatever problem which humans have, brought themselves. Apathy, which we see all over at all stages when we ask them to do even simple things. It's like, this is stopping me from doing something better. Like what you said, if I tell them to take a flight, why? When I have the money and I can travel more comfortably, who are you to stop us?
So,
I mean, damn the climate change, but today I am going to have pleasure.
understood. See, there are two answers to this. One, what else can you do? If you know that we are facing this, first point, and I have a second point, second answer, what else can you do except trying? And I will give an example. Like as I told earlier, in South Asian countries, the bitterness and the differences have grown tremendously. And when I was speaking in an official forum in the UN, just in Baku, few days ago, on 14th of November, one Bangladesh person from a civil society, I was a speaker in the panel and he was in the participants. He brought up this Tripura releasing water and India doing all this. So we see all this. There is tremendous amount of enmity already built into it by some vested interest and not explaining what is happening. In the other meeting, what I told about the Bangladesh pavilion meeting and what we decided to do, I proposed this, and fortunately at least that 10-15 groups present there, they accepted. We explained the situation that this is without a collective action, we cannot tackle it. So can we for the time being bypass or sideline the major differences in our perceptions, our perspectives, what we feel, and start building on the connectivities, the friendships, the essential connections that we have, and we have many. And this is at a point where you face a strong concrete wall, there is no point in butting your head again and again on the wall, hoping that it will break. Then you find some other way where you can bypass the wall or maybe chip away the base of the wall. So that's one thing that we must do, and some of us are doing that. We also know tomorrow, just by few civil society groups, we cannot bridge this massive gap that has been created. But we can start that ripple effect. And we have already started that. Already 7 or 8 different groups from 3 countries have responded. They felt the same, that we are being constrained into an enmity under adversarial relationships, which is not our creation, which is not natural for us. Similarly, when people say this, some people say this, particularly the aspirational class say this, but amongst them, same thing was true in Europe and US. Today, hundreds of thousands of young people and not so young people in Europe and US, they are now clearly seeing the lost opportunities and blocked opportunities. They are clearly seeing that because of these impacts, their possibilities of economic development and their possibilities of a reasonably good life is continuously being undercut. And that has started in India also. Large communities are now seeing that we are losing much more because of these impacts. And once they start connecting with why these impacts are increasing, they start responding. Same problem we also faced when we started this on climate action. But large number of communities have come on board saying we reject this model. We don't want this, which is harming my today, my ecology, and my child's future. That's far more powerful driver, because once they realize that my children or their children will have no future, forget about what future, they will have no future, then they react differently, respond differently. And again, without trying, there is no way that you can just give up and say, oh, if this is some people, and this is a misconception. I'll say that is a misconception. I'm not challenging you. I've seen that this is a misconception that largest number of people say we have to do this. It's not that. Very large numbers see that there is something wrong. something wrong is happening and I am not getting, particularly if you look today at India and South Asian subcontinent, huge number of people, there is no possible good future and they are seeing that they are angry. That anger also you can see. They are falling prey to some lollipops, that's also true. But you have to do work where you can build up something rather than just saying, okay, this is the block, so what can I do? So that's what we are doing. We know there are major obstacles, we know there are major blocks, but we are trying to, one, keep away the base of the obstacles, and second, work around those. So that's the only way you can work. We don't know whether that will be successful in preventing this or having a better future, but we can't do anything else. You were saying something.
Last question, probably. I wanted to, want to understand that what are the responses that you can see if Government of India has to, take this very seriously. I hope that they take this seriously. What are the kind of responses that you see have to happen from the Government of India?
Government of India. See, despite all things, I will give credit to Mr. Modi's governance in one respect, because if you look at before his government, at least India's targets for renewable energy, India's targets for what percentage of our energy, electricity basically, will come from non-fossil sources has been drastically increased. And from a few thousand megawatt, that is a few gigawatt, now that target has been first raised to 175 gigawatt, that is 1,75,000 megawatt, and now by 2030 up to 500 gigawatt. So that's a very substantial target, not enough for India, but still a very substantial jump. So why did that happen? Because of two things. Because of course, these are all political games. Mr. Modi loves international accolades and bahubai, claps. So when that opportunity arose, he took that opportunity of bringing the ISA, International Solar Alliance, to India along with Mr. Macron. So these two are the initiating nations, and 3-4 factors worked for him to actually commit in a sense. Of course, the today's climate governance architecture globally do not actually work on commitment basis, but pledge and review basis. There is a fundamental difference between these two. I am not going to details of that climate governance architecture, but pledge and review, and if he has pledged fairly high targets than what was before, he gets lot of praise. And after that, he got the Champion of Earth award from UNEP, that you might know. Though he is breaking down most environmental regulation, he is putting in jail any environmental defenders, but he got the Champion of Earth award, because globally what happens in India really don't count that much, unfortunately. And if you oppress your people, if you break your environmental regulatory framework, if you actually put all of us in jail, it doesn't count as much as you give some very high sounding, high target kind of pledge and take the claps in the international forum. So that's what has worked in India. Also, leave apart this year and the last year, before that actually the fossil fuel spread did slow down. Coal power did slow down because of multiple international, national, including economic situation. So economy also will work very soon against this, except the entrenched investment and that interest, that's still preventing. Otherwise, today putting 100 megawatt of new solar power plant and the price it generates power is actually lower cost than putting 100 megawatt coal power plant and the price it generates. A new solar power plant can generate 1 kilowatt of power at less than 3 rupees. A new coal power plant, the minimum cost is 3 rupees 70 paisa. So plain economic interest works against coal, against oil, but there are sectors which are very entrenched into oil and coal. So that's one major stumbling block. And that's why India and China in Glasgow in the COP26, they objected very strongly against the phrase coal phase out, and they were successful in blocking that. Yes, you have to decide which, please.
Okay. One more question, but we are already.
So you spoke about methane. So what human activities do you see that those are producing methane, like polluted rivers, STP plants?
See, the
How much do they contribute?
the biggest contributor as presently estimated, apart from that what I said amplifying feedback mechanism, is leakage from methane infrastructure. The natural gas is methane, CNG natural gas is methane, and not the LPG. LPG is butane propane mixture. Methane leakage from pipeline, storage, etc. is the biggest contributor. One point of time when we landed in Copenhagen in 2009 for COP15, the first thing we noticed while going out of the airport in the tunnel going out, big picture, a South Asian woman cooking something or doing something, and South Asian brown cloud was the one of the hot topics. So South Asia at that time far poorer was supposed to be contributing much. Our rice fields were supposed to be contributing much, which the CSIR very clearly showed is a minor contribution. The rice the flood irrigation do contribute to methane emission, but that is not a major contribution. The biggest contribution today is leakage, which is called fugitive emission, which is not traced. The second biggest contribution probably is what is coming up from because of the warming permafrost and warming Arctic Ocean and other seas in that, the methane that is coming out of that, extra methane. Achha.
So, any tips on how to communicate this crisis with next generation children and without making them
Afraid? See, it's a good question, because without taking this message to many others, school children, see, I don't know, I have worked with school children quite extensively for around 20 years plus. In fact, I personally did workshops with both school children and teachers in around 220 districts of India. Not only states but districts also, science teachers basically. School children is a little difficult proposition, because today you will talk about something, tomorrow somebody else will come and talk about something, and they are in a very fluid situation. Far more productive is young students in universities, colleges, those just going out into the work field. If you try communicate with them what they have already seen, because all these are coming in the media also. The massive disaster which happened last year in Himachal, the massive flooding that happened, these are regularly, heatwave, lot of heatwave deaths, these are regularly coming in media, and you young people do notice them. It's not that they are completely oblivious of that. It has not yet set in as one of the primary things, but do notice them. If you engage them into conversation and their own futures, how do you see, if you engage them in conversations like, how do you see your work possibilities where the food production falls like this, if the power plants, they lose, like last year there was a report, globally inland water bodies lost very huge amount of net water. So power plants, coal, nuclear, both use lot of water for cooling. So how do you see your industries running with this kind of climate situation? How do you see your food systems surviving? Because the first big hit will be the food system. With both the biodiversity loss, and out of this 1 million species, a very large part is insects. And as we all know, insects are the primary pollinators for fruits and vegetables. So if your food system collapses, what kind of future civilization, what kind of thing you do? That's a question that needs to be engaged. So you need to put them into concern mode, not into fright mode, but in real concern mode. And that is working with a lot of young people. Because when I talk with young people in Europe or US, I've taken a lot of workshops, meetings, many of them are thinking exactly about that. How does the future look with all these possibilities? Because these are realities that they are also saying. Thank you very much.